Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, and welcome to another episode of For Whom the Bell Rings. Today's episode will focus on the negative aspects of advertising and the relationship between advertising, behavior, and conditioning. Your hosts today are Cameron
and Elizabeth. For
your listening pleasure, we've attempted to get B.F. Skinner to guest star in this episode, but we discover that he is otherwise indisposed.
At the heart of all gambling devices, and it has the same effect. The pigeon can become a pathological gambler just as a person can.
That's enough from you, Skinner. Get back to your box.
Let's look at how advertising can be viewed as a negative. Have you ever looked around your house and thought about the amount of things you own that you just don't need? Advertising uses various techniques, including classical and operant conditioning, to encourage consumers to spend money that they don't have on products that they don't need.
Another example of the negative learning produced by advertising can be seen if we look at the promises made by advertisements. Typical advertisements promise rewards that are, quite simply, unrealistic. This skews the expectations of the consumers and produces a feeling of entitlement that will likely never be realized.
For our listeners to get the most out of this episode, we have to differentiate between two fundamental psychological paradigms, classical and operant conditioning. Classical conditioning is the process of pairing a neutral stimulus, called the CS, like the ringing of a bell, with an unconditioned stimulus, called the US. This is a stimulus that produces a physiological response, like salivating at the sight of food.
Using classical conditioning, advertisers pair irrelevant stimuli, like an inadequately clothed woman, with a product that they're attempting to sell. This forms an association between the CS, the product, and the US, the attractive woman.
On the other hand, operant conditioning, sometimes called operant learning, works using a positive or negative consequence to reinforce behavior. In contrast to classical conditioning, operant conditioning requires the learner to actively participate in the learning process.
A good example of the use of operant conditioning in advertising is coupons. The consumer receives a reward, a discount, for behaving in a desired way, buying the product.
We are now going to examine two commercials to illustrate the conditioning principles that advertisers use to encourage consumers to purchase their products. The first commercial is an old radio ad for Winston cigarettes.
Hiya, Mr. Flintstone.
Greetings, Rocky, my boy. Pack of Winstons, please.
Oh, you like them Winston cigarettes, huh, Mr. Flintstone?
But of course, they really got something.
You bet your life. Folks who really enjoy smoking know it's what's up front that counts, and that's where Winston steps out ahead of the crowd with their exclusive filter blend. Choice golden tobaccos, specially selected and specially processed for filter smoking.
Hold it!
What you mean?
What are you pitching Winston's at me for? You know I never smoke nothing else.
Just practicing, Mr. Flintstone. Everybody knows that
Winston tastes good, like cigarette should.
This advertisement is a good example of classical conditioning. It uses higher order conditioning to create a positive association with Winston's cigarettes.
For those of you who didn't major in psychology, higher order conditioning is a form of classical conditioning in which a CS, the cigarettes, is associated with a previously well-established CS, the Flintstones. In this case, advertisers are taking advantage of the fact that there is an existing association between the Flintstones and happiness, as the Flintstones were, at the time of the commercial, popular entertainment.
Thanks. Sometimes I get a bit ahead of myself with the terms. You bring up a good point, though. The Flintstones are a little outdated now. One problem that advertisers can run into is a stimulus becoming devalued. If this commercial were used now, when the Flintstones are not in every household, it would not have the same impact as it did back in its day.
So, why is this ad negative?
It's negative on multiple levels. Firstly, cigarettes have been shown to cause significant damage to the well-being of the consumer. Secondly, cigarettes are expensive. When Winston's creates the positive association for their cigarettes, they are encouraging consumers to buy products that not only waste their money, but are also hazardous to their health.
The second advertisement we're going to look at is for a buy one, get one free sale at Payless Shoes.
Buckle up and get sassy half off. Find sexy, get smart half off. Buy one, get one half off everything during Payless BOGO.
The Payless commercial employs both classical and operant conditioning techniques. If we look at it from a classical conditioning perspective, we see backward conditioning. The brand, being the CS, is presented at the very end of the commercial. The consumer has already experienced the positive unconditioned stimuli of the music and the prospect of a sale.
This commercial becomes even more effective through operant conditioning, once the consumer actively participates in the buy one get one free sale. The connection between Payless and the positive reinforcer, the sale,